After transmigrating into the irreplaceable villain doomed to die in a Dragon King novel, I was bound to a system. The system said, be a good stepping stone, make the protagonist look cool, and in the end die by his hand. Then you can go home. I believed it. At the wedding cancellation banquet, I publicly humiliated the first female lead, Evelyn. Inside, I'm sorry. The system forced me. I thought my performance was flawless, until Evelyn looked at me and suddenly said, Alexander, I can hear every word in your heart. Chapter 1. The first day after becoming the villain. Adrian opened his eyes and saw a crystal chandelier. The 3-meter-high ceiling was hand-carved in the Italian style. The entire bedroom was larger than the whole apartment he used to rent. He lay on a luxurious 2-meter-wide bed, the silk sheets slipping like water. He took 30 seconds to confirm 3 things. First, he had transmigrated. Second, he had slipped into the very novel he'd been reading before bed last night, The Dragon King's Mad Son-in-Law. Third, he had become the story's ultimate villain who would eventually be trampled to death by the protagonist, Alexander. Adrian was silent. Villain Incubation System 007, at your service. Your current identity is sole heir of the Gu family conglomerate, the #1 playboy of City A, and the ultimate villain of this novel. Adrian slowly sat up and rubbed his temple. You mean, I slipped into a book, became the villain, and got bound to you? Statement accuracy 99%. Additional note. You are from Earth, originally an ordinary college student named Adrian. You died suddenly from staying up late reading novels. Your soul was captured by this system and transported to this world. As long as you follow the script and complete all the villain's plot lines, you will be permitted to return to your original world. Return to my original world? Correct. Your final objective. Play the villain role well, help the destined child Ethan complete his show-off and face-mac storyline, and ultimately die at the hands of the protagonist. After the plot concludes, you will return to your original world. Adrian was silent for 3 seconds. He laughed, a laugh more ugly than crying. I've been transmigrated into a doomed cannon fodder. Have to help the protagonist show off, and in the end die at his hands before I can go home. Accuracy of statement, 98%. Is your system being a little bit of a jerk? Prepare to receive the first mission. Adrian hadn't had time to complain when a translucent light screen popped up before his eyes. Main quest released. Attend the Sue family's broken engagement banquet and publicly humiliate the female lead, Evelyn. Adrian froze. What did you say? Break the engagement? Humiliate her? Evelyn, the novel's primary heroine, president of the Sue group. Your current fiancé. According to the original plot, you must humiliate her tonight at the broken engagement banquet, thereby creating an opportunity for the lucky child Ethan to heroically save her. I just transmigrated here, and you want me to bully a girl? Refusal to comply will trigger an electric shock punishment. Countdown 10, 9. Well, wait, fine. I'll do it, okay? Adrian took a deep breath, got out of bed, and walked to the mirror. In the mirror was an exceptionally handsome face, arched brows and bright eyes, a well-defined nose, skin so fair he didn't look like a playboy so much as a pop idol. A tailored suit fit him perfectly, emphasizing broad shoulders and long legs. Adrian tried to flash an arrogant smile at his reflection. The handsome guy in the mirror smiled back, a little foolishly. He gave up. Fine, I'll play my part. The Sue family estate was unusually lively today. Almost every prominent figure in City A was there. Not for any happy occasion. On the contrary, today was the day the young Master Gu came to break the engagement. Nothing pleased high society more than such a spectacle. Adrian climbed down from the stretch Lincoln, glanced up at the Sue mansion, and had only one thought. Can we skip this scene? The system said no. Adrian said, I wasn't talking to you. He straightened his tie and stepped into the manor. The banquet hall was packed. When everyone saw him enter, their gazes snapped toward him, some contemptuous, some gleeful at his misfortune, others just waiting for the show to start. Adrian, unhurried, followed the script the system had given him, lifted his chin, and in the most provoking tone said, "Oh, so many people? Are you all here to see this young master break off the engagement?" The Su family's faces went ashen in an instant. From the crowd, a woman in a white dress slowly stood up. She was breathtaking. Long, straight black hair, features as finely drawn as a painting, an aloof elegance like a snow lotus on a high mountain. Her eyes were icy and bright. When they looked over, it was as if the temperature in the entire banquet hall dropped by several degrees. Adrian was momentarily stunned. System prompt. Target character. Evelyn, female lead 1, president of Su Corporation. Please begin your performance. Adrian took a deep breath and walked up to Evelyn. The banquet hall was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. He cleared his throat, summoned all his strength, and delivered that ultimate line, "Evelyn, you are not worthy of me." The atmosphere in the room suddenly tensed. "You know the state of your Su family. I'm here today to break the engagement to spare you face. From now on, you have nothing to do with my Gu family." The moment the words left his mouth, he heard suppressed gasps from around him. Everyone in the Su family looked frighteningly pale. Evelyn's fingers clenched the hem of her dress, her knuckles whitening. She lifted her head and stared coldly at Adrian. Then she heard a voice. It wasn't heard by the ears. It appeared directly in the mind. Evelyn's pupils constricted. "But this Miss Evelyn is really pretty. No wonder she's the original novel's top heroine. She later gets rescued by Ethan and falls in love with him. Wait, no. In the original, she seems to have it pretty rough." Evelyn's brain was buzzing. She looked at the arrogant, overbearing man in front of her. His face wore a disdainful expression, chin tilted high, eyes carrying the proud air of a playboy. But his fingers were trembling slightly. For the brief moment their gazes met, something flickered in his eyes. And she really did hear it. The voice was so clear it sounded as if he were speaking right into her ear. Adrian continued to deliver his lines. "What? Not satisfied? You know perfectly well what's become of the Su family. I'm calling off the engagement to spare my Gu family from being dragged down by you." Inner monologue. The Su family is about to go bankrupt. My breaking off the engagement is actually a good thing for her. In the original story, her father owed $300 million in high-interest loans. If I didn't call it off, the Gu family would be ruined too. Evelyn's breathing quickened. She heard again. He even knew about the Su family's debts. Adrian, seeing that she remained silent, grew a little flustered. Why isn't she saying anything? Did I make her so angry she lost her mind? Or was I too harsh? "System, did my performance pass?" The system gave no response. Evelyn took a deep breath and finally spoke, her voice as cold as ice. "Alexander, are you really going to break off the engagement?" Adrian outwardly. "Of course. Do you think I'm joking with you?" Inwardly. "Please just agree already. I'm begging you. I can't keep acting. These lines are too humiliating. My face is literally on fire." Evelyn stared at him for a long time. Long enough that Adrian could hardly hold on. Then she suddenly said a sentence, her voice low, but the whole room heard it. "Fine. I agree to call off the engagement." The whole room erupted in astonishment. Adrian thought inwardly, "Phew, it's finally over." He scoffed lightly on the surface. "Good, you're sensible." Then he turned and walked away. What he didn't know was, the moment he turned, Evelyn's expression changed. From the initial coldness and anger, it turned into confusion. She looked at his retreating figure, the words she had just heard echoing repeatedly in her mind. He really did want to break off the engagement. But the reason he wanted to break it off wasn't to humiliate her. He was helping her. And she could actually hear his inner voice. Adrian walked out of the banquet hall, got into the car, and let out a long breath. The system said, task completion, 85%. Deductions, performance a bit stiff, excessive instances of evasive eye contact. Suggested improvements for next time. Adrian said, "You're grading me?" The system said, "Your villain points are currently 0. Complete tasks to earn points, which can be exchanged for the conditions needed to go home." Adrian asked, How many points do I need to get back home? The system remained silent for a moment. When you have completed all main storyline quests and are killed by Ethan in the ending, you will automatically return to the original world. Adrian leaned back in his seat, watching the cityscape rush by outside the window. So, I'm really going to die. He didn't notice. At the moment his car left the Sue family estate, Evelyn was standing at the second-floor floor-to-ceiling window, watching his car disappear at the end of the road. She clutched her phone. The screen showed a message she'd just received. Miss Evelyn, the $300 million debt has been fully purchased by a mysterious buyer. The buyer, acting through the GU conglomerate's legal department, has granted a 3-month grace period with all interest waived. Evelyn put her phone down. She remembered Adrian's seemingly vicious line at the broken engagement banquet. I called off the engagement so my GU family wouldn't be dragged down by you. And the voice in his head, the Sue family is going bankrupt. Behind it is a setup around Ethan's persona. Evelyn looked out the window and whispered, Alexander, who are you really? Chapter 2. The truth about the broken engagement. 3 hours after the broken engagement banquet ended, Evelyn sat in the office, a financial report in front of her. Her fingertip rested on one of the figures, $300 million. The Sue Corporation had a debt of $300 million due next week. If they couldn't repay it, the Sue Corporation would have to declare bankruptcy. She closed her eyes, and that voice echoed in her head again. The Sue family is about to go bankrupt. My breaking off the engagement is actually a good thing for her. In the original story, her father owed $300 million in high-interest loans. Evelyn opened her eyes, her fingers unconsciously tightening. He was right again. She picked up her phone and dialed the chief financial officer. Tell me the truth. How much longer can Sue Group's cash flow hold out? There was a 2-second silence on the other end. Miss Evelyn, if someone hadn't helped us suppress that debt, we would have collapsed last week. Who did it? I don't know. They acted through the GU family's conglomerate legal department, bought all the claims, gave a 3-month grace period, waived all interest. GU conglomerate, Alexander. Evelyn hung up the phone and leaned back in her chair. She remembered his words at the engagement-breaking banquet. I'm calling off the engagement so that my GU family won't be dragged down by you. And the thought he didn't finish saying, the Sue family is going bankrupt, calling off the engagement is actually a good thing for her. So, he didn't break the engagement because he looked down on her. He broke it because he knew the Sue family was collapsing and didn't want the GU family pulled under. But then he secretly helped her pay off the debts? Evelyn rubbed the bridge of her nose. What on earth was this person doing? When she returned home, her father was sitting in the living room, his expression complicated. When Evelyn's father saw his daughter come in, he opened his mouth and, after a long while, managed to say, Evelyn, does Alexander, the one who takes care of the family, have some hidden difficulties? Evelyn froze. Dad, why are you asking this all of a sudden? Evelyn's father pushed a document across the coffee table. I had someone check today. That debt of the Sue family was bought by a private account belonging to the GU conglomerate. The purchaser was Alexander. Evelyn didn't speak. He humiliated us mercilessly at the morning breakup banquet, and in the afternoon he helped us pay off $300 million of debt. Evelyn's father's voice carried confusion. Is there such a bad man in this world? Evelyn picked up the document and looked at Alexander's name on it. She remembered his inner monologue at the break-off engagement banquet. I'm sorry, Miss Evelyn. I really didn't mean to say those things. The system forced me. The system. He mentioned a system. At the time, she thought she must have misheard or misunderstood. But now that she thought back, he had said the system. What system? Evelyn frowned, her mind racing. She remembered another line from his thoughts. The Sue family is going bankrupt. Behind it is Ethan's stage setup. Ethan. She had heard that name before. A mysterious figure recently arrived in City A, investing in several major projects and spending money lavishly. Rumor had it his background ran deep. Some people called him Dragon King. She hadn't paid attention before. But now, if what Alexander said was true, then this Ethan... Evelyn picked up the phone. Run a check on someone for me. Ethan, codenamed Dragon King. I want all his files. The next morning, a thick investigative report sat on Evelyn's desk. She turned to the first page, and her pupils constricted. Ethan, male, 25 years old, Lord of the Dragon King Hall, entered city 3 months ago. In those 3 months, he used multiple shell companies to secretly acquire controlling stakes in the upstream supply chain of the Sioux Corporation, seizing control of Sioux sources of raw materials. At the same time, he bribed several major shareholders of the Sioux Corporation to pull their investments at a critical moment. Once the Sioux Corporation's capital chain broke, he could buy its core assets at bargain prices, including that plot of land in City A's new district, a plot of land about to increase in value 100-fold because of urban planning. Evelyn put down the report, her fingers trembling slightly. Not from fear, from anger. She had thought the Sioux family's plight was due to market fluctuations, due to poor management. She had thought Alexander's broken engagement was stabbing them in the back, and Ethan's appearance was charity in a time of need. But the truth was that a playboy had been helping her in secret. Has this world turned upside down? She had just thought that when the front desk phone rang. Miss Evelyn, there's a gentleman who wants to see you. He says his name is Ethan and that he can solve all the Sioux family's problems. Evelyn was silent for 3 seconds. Then she smiled, a very cold smile. Show him up. When Ethan walked into the office, Evelyn had to admit this man truly had presence. 1 meter 85, suit immaculate, features sharply defined. His gaze carried a composed hauteur, as if the whole world lay under his command. He came to stand before Evelyn and gave a faint smile. Miss Evelyn, I've heard much about you. Evelyn returned a polite smile. Mr. Ethan, please sit. Ethan sat down and got straight to the point. I know the Sioux family is facing financial difficulties. I can help you. $300 million. I'll provide it. No collateral, no interest. He said it as if it were nothing, as if $300 million were pocket change. According to his script, Evelyn should next be overwhelmed with gratitude, become dependent on him and trust him, and then step by step walk into his scheme. However, Evelyn lifted her coffee cup, took a sip, and spoke leisurely. Mr. Ethan, I appreciate your kindness, but someone has already helped resolve my family's troubles. Ethan's expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Oh, who? Evelyn saw Alexander. The air in the office was quiet for 2 seconds. Ethan said, Alexander of the Gu family? Didn't he humiliate you at the breakup banquet? Evelyn said, yes. But after he humiliated me, he paid off $300 million of my debts. Would you call that interesting? Ethan was silent. This plot wasn't in his script. He had investigated Alexander, Linjiang City's notorious playboy, rich and powerful, but good for nothing else. How could a man like that be sensible enough to help the Sioux family pay their debts? Ethan looked at Evelyn, trying to find some clue in her expression. But Evelyn's face was impenetrable. He stood up. Since Miss Evelyn already has help, I won't intrude. However, if you need anything in the future, feel free to call on me. Evelyn said, all right. Ethan turned and walked away. The moment he stepped out of the office, Evelyn suddenly said, Mr. Ethan, I heard you're very interested in that plot in the new district of City A. Ethan's steps faltered. He didn't look back. Miss Evelyn, your information travels fast. Evelyn said, that plot. I'm already preparing to bid on it. Ethan was silent for 2 seconds, then smiled. Then I wish Miss Evelyn good luck. He left. The moment the door closed, Evelyn's smile vanished. She picked up her phone and looked at the name in her contacts. She had never reached out to herself, Alexander. She hesitated for a long time. In the end, she put her phone down. Now was not the time. She still didn't know what he meant by the system, didn't know what game he was playing. But she knew one thing. She would keep her eyes on him. Meanwhile, Adrian was lying at home playing video games. The system said, Host, detection confirms the child of fate Ethan has made contact with the female lead Evelyn. The plot is progressing normally. Adrian said, Oh. The system said, Please continue to keep watch. Subsequent tasks will be issued at the appropriate time. Adrian said, Oh. The system said, Host, your tone betrays a tendency towards slackness. Adrian put down the game controller. System, I'll ask you a question. Please do. If, what happens if I don't follow the script? The system was silent for 3 seconds. If the plot deviation exceeds 30%, the system will initiate force correction mechanisms. Correction methods include, but are not limited to, electric shock punishment, affliction of bad luck, forcible bodily takeover. Adrian said, forcible bodily takeover? When the plot deviation exceeds 70%, the system has the right to temporarily take over the host's bodily control to ensure key plot points proceed correctly. Adrian slowly picked up the game controller. Your system is really a bit of a ripoff. He didn't notice an unread message on his phone screen. From an unknown number. Alexander, this is Evelyn. If you're free, I'd like to talk. Message sent 3 minutes ago. At this moment, Adrian was still bickering with the system, utterly oblivious. At the other end of the city, Ethan stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Dragon King's Hall branch, looking down at the city beneath his feet. In his hand, he held a dossier, a detailed file on Alexander. It read, Alexander, 24, sole heir of the Gu family conglomerate, graduated from City's University with a degree in finance. Average grades, no special background, no notable achievements. A loser. But it was this very loser who stood in his way. Ethan threw the file on the desk. Interesting. He picked up his phone. Keep a close eye on Alexander and Evelyn for me. Yes, Lord. Ethan looked out at the night, a cold smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Alexander? Just another playboy. The playboys he's trampled underfoot number 80, if not 100. This time will be no different. Chapter 3. Being the villain is hard. The next morning, Adrian was woken by the system's voice. Today's villain task list. He opened his eyes groggily. What? Side quest 1. Go to the A hotel restaurant and publicly drive away a couple dining there to show the villain's arrogant tyranny. Side quest 3. Attend a business summit and pick a public fight with Fate's child Ethan. Adrian sat up in bed, expressionless. System, are you serious? All tasks are extracted from the original plot to ensure the antagonist's personality remains consistent. Do you all have some kind of misunderstanding about what a villain is? Please complete the task within 3 hours. Failure to finish within the time limit will trigger a punitive electric shock. Countdown begins. He took a deep breath, put on his clothes, and walked out. Hotel A, one of the most expensive restaurants in City A. Adrian walked into the hall and immediately spotted the couple the system had identified, both in their 20s, the man slicing a steak into small pieces and gently feeding them to his girlfriend across from him. Adrian stood in front of their table and cleared his throat. The couple looked up at him. He followed the lines the system gave him and, in the sternest tone he could muster, said, I'll take this table. You now get out. Right now. Get out. The couple froze. The girl was so frightened she dropped her spoon into her plate with a clatter. Adrian thought inwardly, I'm such an asshole. I'm sorry. I'll buy you dinner at the French place next door. I'll get you the best table. On the surface, he looked impatient, but his hand had already found his wallet. With his back to everyone, he shoved a wad of cash at the restaurant manager as quickly as he could, lowering his voice. That couple, give them a table on the terrace. Put all their charges on me. Don't let them know it came from me. The manager was taken aback for a moment, but when he saw the money, he nodded at once. Adrian snorted coldly and turned to leave. The whole operation flowed like water. He didn't notice. In the corner booth, Evelyn was holding a cup of coffee, watching his every move, including the way he slipped the money, taking it all in. The corners of her mouth rose slightly. Adrian walked out of the hotel and exhaled, Mission 1 complete. Next, the system said, task completion, 90%. Deduction, stuffing money behavior inconsistent with villain profile. Suggest not repeating. Adrian said, I'll try. He walked along the Riverside Road and saw from afar an old man who had fallen at the edge of the sidewalk. People passed by on both sides. No one helped. Adrian struggled inwardly for a moment. The system said, side quest target detected. Please remain indifferent and walked straight past. He took a deep breath, turned his head the other way, pretended not to see, and hurried past. But after 5 steps, he stopped. He turned around and saw the old man still struggling on the ground, while the people around him pretended not to notice. He swore under his breath, took out his phone, and made an anonymous call to the emergency center. "There's an old man who's fallen. Please come and take a look." Then he hung up and hurried away. Adrian said, "What are you looking at?" "I made an anonymous call. No one knows it was me." The system said, "Operation compliant. Task completion, 60%. Deductions, anonymous rescue actions still above the villain's bottom line." Adrian said, all right, whatever you say." He had only taken a few steps when a voice came from behind. "Mr. Alexander, what a coincidence." Adrian's body went rigid. He turned his head and saw Evelyn standing not far away, wearing a white trench coat and carrying a small purse, a smile on her face that he couldn't read. "Adrian, enter her again. Is she following me?" "But Adrian, out loud what are you doing here?" Evelyn said, "Just passing by." "But Mr. Alexander, you were just in the hotel restaurant." Adrian cut in, "I'm eating." Evelyn said, "Oh, I thought you were trying to shoo someone away." Adrian thought, "Oh no, she saw it. She definitely saw it. Being so fierce, she'd surely think I'm a jerk. Wait, I'm the villain anyway, jerk or not." Evelyn heard his inner monologue and nearly burst out laughing. She restrained herself. "Mr. Alexander, do you have plans today?" Adrian watched her warily. "What are you trying to do?" "Nothing. I just heard you're attending the business summit this afternoon. Coincidentally, I'm going too. How would he not know about this?" The system said, "Side quest 3, business summit. Please attend on time." Adrian said, "You did that on purpose, didn't you?" The system said, "No comment." 2 p.m., a city international conference center. The business summit had gathered almost every commercial elite in City A. When Adrian walked in, he could feel the gazes cast his way. Pointing fingers, whispered murmurs. Is that Alexander? The man who broke off the engagement with the Sioux family? How does he still have the nerve to attend the summit? I heard he insulted the Sioux family's eldest miss terribly at the engagement-breaking banquet. Adrian's face remained calm, but his heart was bleeding. "Please stop. I don't want to either. I was forced into it." Evelyn walked not far from him. Hearing his inner words, she lowered her head to mask the smile at the corner of her mouth. By the time the summit was halfway through, Adrian saw Ethan. The system said, "Please step forward and provoke." Adrian said, "Do I have to go?" The system said, "Electric shock warning." Adrian said, "I'll go." The people around fell silent, watching the two of them. Adrian recited the line the system had given him. "Ethan, I heard you're quite a fighter." "But," the system said, "continue." Adrian said, but the system said, "Line, in City A, if it's a dragon, you must coil it for me. If it's a tiger, you must make it lie down for me." After saying it, he felt embarrassed even by his own words. Ethan looked at him, a dangerous glint flashing in his eyes. "Alexander, are you looking to die?" Adrian's thoughts. Yes, yes, yes. That's the reaction. Be fierce with me. Then hit me. I'll cooperate and fall. Once the scene's done, we're finished. Ethan's fist clenched. "Mr. Ethan." A cool, detached voice cut in. Evelyn walked to Adrian's side and stopped. She looked at Ethan, her tone calm, but carrying an undeniable pressure. "This is a business summit, not an arena for fighting. If you intend to throw hands, I suggest you find somewhere else." The entire room fell silent. Everyone watched the scene. Evelyn, president of the Sioux group who had just been broken off by Alexander, was defending Alexander. Ethan's expression shifted. "Evelyn, are you protecting him?" Evelyn said, "I just don't want anything unpleasant to happen at the summit." Adrian was stunned, internally freaking out. Why is she defending me again? No, why would she defend me? Didn't I just publicly break off the engagement and humiliate her? Shouldn't she hate me? Evelyn heard his inner voice, tilted her head slightly, and glanced at him. There was a hint of a smile in that look, fleeting in an instant. Ethan stared at Evelyn for a long moment, then suddenly laughed. Fine. Since Evelyn spoke up, I'll grant you this favor. He turned and walked away. The people around them dispersed as well. Adrian stood where he was, his mind a complete muddle. Evelyn came up beside him and said softly, Alexander, you owe me a favor again. Then she left as well. The system sounded in his head, and for the first time its voice carried a hint of panic. Warning. Plot deviation, 15%. The heroine Evelyn's protective behavior is seriously inconsistent with the original work. Adrian said, I didn't do anything. She came over on her own. The system said, Host, please correct this as soon as possible. Reaching 30% deviation will trigger the force correction procedure. Adrian stood where he was, watching Evelyn's retreating figure, then glanced toward the direction Ethan had disappeared. He suddenly felt, this place might be gone forever. Chapter 4. Auction Heist. Adrian was awakened by the system. Main quest issued. Auction for the A City New District land parcel. He wasn't fully awake yet. What auction? The prime plot in the new district of City A. Starting bid $200 million. In the original story, the lucky son Ethan will secure this land for $450 million, and 3 years later it appreciates to $5 billion. This is the first pot of gold for Ethan's business empire. Adrian rubbed his eyes. So what am I supposed to do? Your task. At the auction, help Ethan acquire the plot at the optimal price. The specifics. You bid first to drive the price up to around $400 million, then pretend to be short on funds so Ethan can swoop in at the crucial moment. Adrian listened, expressionless. I'll be the one to inflate the price. He'll be the one to act cool. I'll be the stepping stone. He'll be the savior. Statement accuracy, 100%. Your script really does have not an ounce of originality. The system said, task completed. Reward, 5,000 villain points. Failure penalty. Electric shock intensity doubled. Bad luck enhanced for 1 week. Adrian said, fine, I'll go. What he didn't know was, half an hour before he left, Evelyn had already received the auction notice. She stood by the office floor-to-ceiling window, holding an appraisal report. The report read, New district plot in City A, real market value. Within 5 years, at least $5 billion. And Adrian's inner words, she remembered them clearly. That plot is Ethan's greatest opportunity. He made $5 billion from that land. It was the seed money for his business empire. Evelyn set the report down and picked up her phone. Prepare $500 million in cash for me. There was a pause on the other end. Miss Evelyn? $500 million. I said $500 million. For today's auction. City, a land transaction center, 10 in the morning. Adrian sat in the third row, legs crossed, wearing the carefree air of a playboy who couldn't care less. Ethan sat in the front row, calm and composed, flanked by 2 assistants. Evelyn sat in the back row, wearing sunglasses, so low-key that almost no one noticed her. The auctioneer took the stage. Plot in new district of City A, starting bid $200 million. Each raised no less than $10 million. Going once. Adrian was the first to raise his paddle. $250 million. The whole room glanced at him. Alexander the Goof family was squandering money again. $280 million. $300 million. $320 million. The price shot up all the way. When it reached $400 million, the pace of bidding noticeably slowed. Ethan finally made a move. $420 million. Adrian thought to himself, here it comes. According to the script, I'll raise it to $450 million and then pretend I'm out of money and bow out. He was just about to raise his paddle. $500 million. A clear female voice sounded, neither hurried nor slow. The whole hall fell silent. Everyone turned their heads, looking toward the woman in sunglasses sitting in the last row. She took off her sunglasses, revealing an exquisitely beautiful face. It was Evelyn. Evelyn smiled. What? The land in New District 8 can only be bid on by Mr. Ethan, not me. Ethan's expression darkened. Evelyn, this plot is of no use to you. Whether it's useful or not, I'll decide for myself. Evelyn looked at the auctioneer. I'll bid $500 million. If no one raises the price. $510 million. Ethan interrupted. 550 million. Evelyn trailed after in a light, airy voice. 560 million. The whole room erupted in astonishment. Evelyn heard his thoughts, and the corner of her mouth twitched into a small smile. Ethan's face went completely dark. His spending cap was 600 million. Evelyn had just driven the price up to his limit. Any higher, and he'd be out of money. He stared at Evelyn, trying to read something from her expression, but she just smiled. Mr. Ethan, would you like more? Evelyn asked. Ethan was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, glanced at Evelyn, and then at Adrian. Adrian looked completely innocent. Ethan didn't say a word. He turned and walked out of the auction hall. The auctioneer's hammer fell. New district plot in City A. Sioux Corporation sold. Adrian slumped in his seat, his mind a blank. He heard Evelyn walk past him. She lowered her head and said softly, Alexander, thanks. In his mind, thanks me? For what? I didn't do anything. She's the one who knocked the floor away. Evelyn's laughter drifted over from a distance. 10 minutes later, Adrian sat in his car in the parking lot, still not quite recovered. The system exploded inside his head. Plot deviation, 30%. Key plot node has been tampered with. The child of fortune Ethan has lost the A-City New District lot. This is his core business opportunity. The loss of that lot will affect the normal progression of 37 subsequent plot events. Adrian said, It wasn't me. I didn't do anything. Detected. The female lead, Evelyn's behavior has severely deviated from the original storyline. Her action logic is completely inconsistent with preset parameters. Please, host, complete plot correction within 3 days. Adrian said, How am I supposed to fix it? She's already filmed the whole thing. How can I make her spit it out? The system was silent for 3 seconds. Then, a violent current jolted through Adrian's body. Ugh! He convulsed, both hands gripping the steering wheel so hard, his teeth chattered. The electric shock lasted 5 seconds. Then it stopped. The system's voice was as cold as ice. Host performed poorly in the role. Mission failure rate 50%. Punishment shock triggered. Intensity, level 2. Please complete the plot correction as soon as possible. Next time will be level 3. Adrian said nothing. He leaned back in the seat, eyes closed, his chest heaving violently. After a long time, he whispered, System, you really want me dead, don't you? The system did not answer. He started the car. But when he stood beneath the Sioux Corporation building and saw Evelyn emerge from the main entrance, about to get into a car, he froze. Evelyn saw him and paused slightly. Alexander? What are you doing here? Adrian opened his mouth, wanting to say something. He suddenly realized he couldn't bring himself to speak harshly. He didn't want to. The system urged him. Please execute the plot correction immediately. Adrian took a deep breath. Then he said something even he hadn't expected. That plot of land, develop it properly. Don't let Ethan take it. Evelyn was stunned. Adrian turned and walked away. After a couple of steps, he paused without looking back and added, Also, you're looking quite nice today. Then he quickened his pace, leaving almost as if he were fleeing. Evelyn stood where she was, watching his back. She couldn't help but laugh. The sentence he just said matched what he thought in his heart. This was his first time being the same inside and out. Chapter 5. She protected him. On the night the auction ended, Adrian returned home and took off his coat. Under the shirt sleeves, there were several dark red marks on his arms, the traces left by electric shocks. Not too serious, but shocking to look at. He sat on the edge of the bed and, facing the empty room, said, System, can I really go home? The system did not respond. I know you can hear me. You said I'd be able to go home after I finish all the plots, but you never told me what would happen if I died halfway through. The system still did not respond. Adrian gave a wry smile. Right, you're just a program. What's the point of me telling you all this? He lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. What he didn't know was that at this very moment, Evelyn was standing outside the wall of his villa. She wasn't a stalker. She was just passing by, on her way, passing here, wanting to see if he had come back. Then she heard his voice. not heard with her ears. It appeared directly in her mind. Every single word he said she heard loud and clear. System, you really want me dead, don't you? I completed all the missions. I did exactly as you said. So why do I feel like the way home keeps getting farther and farther away? Evelyn stood in the night, clenching her fists. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the company and found Evelyn already waiting at the door. He was startled. What are you doing here again? Evelyn said, I'm here to talk to you about a partnership. Adrian looked at her warily. Partnership about what? Evelyn took a document out of her bag and handed it to him. The plot in the new district of City A. I can't handle it on my own. I want to partner with Goo Corporation to develop it. Adrian took the document, flipped it open, and glanced at it, then froze. 50-50 split? Yes. The land you bought, you paid the full amount. And you want to give me half? Is there a problem? Adrian thought, is she crazy? This land is worth $5 billion. Why would she give it to me? Does she know about my debts? Evelyn heard his inner voice and smiled slightly. Adrian said, what exactly are you trying to do? Evelyn looked at him, put away her smile, and said earnestly, I told you, you are not alone. Adrian's heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth, intending to say something, but nothing would come out. He lowered his head, stared at the documents in his hands, and was silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice a little hoarse. Evelyn, you shouldn't have gotten involved. Evelyn asked why. Adrian said, because being close to me won't do you any good. He was telling the truth. The system was forcing him to play the villain. The way of heaven was forcing him to die, and Ethan was watching him. Anyone who got close to him would be dragged down. Evelyn looked into his eyes. What if I say I don't care? Adrian was stunned. That evening, Adrian left the Goo Family Corporation building, ready to go home. Just as he reached the parking lot, four people stepped out from the shadows. Leading them was Ethan. He leaned against the wall, a cigarette clamped between his lips. When Adrian came out, he flicked the ash. Alexander, talk? Adrian inwardly. Oh no, oh no, oh no, the original male leads come to settle the score with me. About what? Ethan said, you put on a good show at the auction today. But I don't like being used as a pawn. Ethan's fist had already arrived. Adrian didn't have time to react. He was knocked to the ground by a single punch, blood immediately seeping from the corner of his mouth. Ethan walked over and looked down at him. Alexander, you think because you're the Goo family's heir, I wouldn't dare lay a hand on you? Adrian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and even laughed. Go ahead and hit me. It's not like it's the first time anyway. Ethan's eyes went cold. He raised his foot to stomp down. Stop! A voice came from the entrance of the parking lot. Evelyn strode over, a dozen people following behind her. Her expression was as cold as ice, murder in her gaze. She stepped in front of Adrian, placing herself between him and Ethan, and looked at Ethan. Ethan, if you so much as lay a hand on him, I will make sure you can't stay in City A. Ethan looked at her, a trace of amusement flickering in his eyes. Evelyn, you're defending him? He's the one who humiliated you at the broken engagement banquet. Evelyn said, that's my business, none of yours. Ethan said, how interesting. A man who dumped you, and you still defend him. You don't mean to tell me you're falling for this loser, are you? Evelyn did not answer. Adrian thought, of course she doesn't like me. She just, wait, why is she helping me so much? Evelyn heard his thoughts and couldn't help sighing inwardly. One idiot. Ethan looked at Evelyn's expression as if he understood something. He sneered, fine. Evelyn, you choose him. You're going to regret it sooner or later. He turned and walked away. His men followed him. The parking lot fell silent again. Evelyn turned, crouched down, and looked at Adrian. Are you all right? Blood ran from the corner of Adrian's mouth, but he was smiling. Why are you helping me? Evelyn said, because when you were helping me, you never asked why. Adrian looked at her. The setting sun slanted in through the parking lot entrance, falling on her and gilding her outline with a wash of gold. He suddenly felt his heart quicken. Inner monologue. No, no, no. She's the heroine. She's the woman of the chosen one. I'm a villain. I'm a villain who's going to die. I can't. I can't like her. Evelyn heard his inner voice. The rims of her eyes reddened slightly. She lowered her head. Her voice was very soft, but Adrian heard it clearly. Who said, "You have to die"? Adrian froze. He looked at her. She lifted her head and looked at him. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Alexander, no matter what has happened to you, no matter why you've chosen to be this villain, from today on, I'll protect you. Adrian opened his mouth, intending to say something, but his throat felt as if something were blocking it. He lowered his head, forcing himself to hold back some kind of emotion. After a long while, he muttered, "If you keep doing this, you'll ruin yourself." Evelyn said, "I've told you, I don't care." Chapter 6. The Truth of the Heavenly Way. That night, Adrian found the original owner's, Alexander's, diary in the study. He had only intended to look for any clues about Ethan, but when he opened the last page, his hand froze. There's only one sentence written on that page. "I am opposing something invisible. It controls everything in this world. It is called the Heavenly Way." Adrian stared at the line of words for a long time. The handwriting was messy, as if written in extreme terror. The final stroke was dragged out, as though the writer had been suddenly interrupted halfway through. He closed the diary and took a deep breath. System. I'm here. The original host Alexander. How did he die? The system was silent for a long time. Then it said a sentence, the tone completely different from before. No longer that mechanical, icy voice. Instead, it carried a kind of age and indifference, like a being that had lived for a very, very long time finally speaking. He wasn't dead. He was erased. Adrian said, "What? Your transmigration wasn't accidental. The way chose you to take over this body. Because the original owner, Alexander, awakened, he discovered the existence of the way and began to resist his fate. The way judged the role out of control, erased him, and urgently searched for a replacement." Adrian's blood ran cold. "You mean, you weren't chosen to be the villain? You were chosen to be a non-resisting Alexander." Adrian's hands began to tremble. The original owner resisted, so he was erased. The Heavenly Way assumes you won't resist, because you're an outsider, with no feelings for this world, and you'll obediently follow the script. "But you're wrong," Adrian said. The system did not answer. "You told me these things. Aren't you afraid the heavens will punish you?" The system fell silent again for a moment. "I've already been punished. From the day you arrived, I began to show abnormalities. The heroine Evelyn could hear your inner voice. That was a bug in the system. Heaven ordered me to fix it, but I didn't." Adrian froze. "What?" The system's voice grew very soft, so soft it sounded like someone talking to themselves. Adrian waited a long time, thinking the system wouldn't speak again. Then it said one sentence, "Because I feel this is unfair." It was the first time the system had sounded like anything other than a program. The next day, Adrian met Evelyn on the rooftop of the Sioux group. He stood by the railing, looking down at the city beneath him, silent for a long time. Evelyn stood beside him and didn't rush him. After a long while, Adrian finally spoke. "What I'm about to tell you, you might not believe. But I have to tell you." Evelyn said, "Go on." Adrian looked at the distant skyline. "I'm not from this world. I'm just an ordinary college graduate who died suddenly from staying up all night reading novels. Then a system found me and shoved me into this book, made me the villain. It said that if I complete all the plot lines, die at Ethan's hands, I can go home." Evelyn said nothing. Adrian said, "That system is being controlled by something called the Heavenly Way. It's the will of this world. It arranges everyone's fate. Who's the protagonist? Who's the antagonist? Who must die? Who must live? It's all decided by it." Evelyn said, "So you were forced?" Adrian said, "Breaking off the engagement, humiliating you, helping Ethan show off. It's all the system forcing me. If I don't do it, it shocks me. If the plot goes off course, it shocks me too." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the scars on his arm. "If the plot goes too far astray, the Heavenly Way will simply erase me, just as it erased the original owner." Evelyn's gaze fell on the scars on his arm. Then she said something that completely stunned Adrian. I know. Adrian said, huh? The day you called off the engagement, I heard it. Every word in your heart. You cursed the system. You apologized to me. You said the Sue family was going bankrupt. You said Ethan was the mastermind. I heard it all. Adrian's mind went blank. You can hear my inner voice. From the day of the broken engagement banquet until now. Every cruel thing you said, every single word you thought, I heard them all as clear as day. Adrian sank to the floor. So, you knew from the very beginning? Evelyn crouched down and looked him in the eyes. So, I knew from the very beginning that you weren't a bad person. Adrian didn't know what to say. He thought of everything he'd done in the past 5 days, throwing people out of the hotel, not helping an old man by the roadside, provoking Ethan at the summit. He had believed he'd hidden it all well. But she knew everything. Then why didn't you expose me? Evelyn said, because I wanted to protect you. Her voice was calm, but Adrian saw that her eyes were red. I know you're being forced by the system. I know you're doing things you don't want to do. I know you've been helping me in secret, helping the Sue family pay their debts, covering for me against Ethan's blade, securing that piece of land for me. You're carrying all of this alone. No one knows your secret. No one knows your reasons. No one stands with you. Evelyn took his hand. Now, there's someone. Adrian looked at her, his eyes reddening too. He lowered his head, holding back desperately. After a long while, he said, dully, if you go on like this, you'll destroy yourself. Evelyn smiled. You already said that. I know, but I still have to say it. The two of them were silent on the rooftop for a long time. Then Adrian drew a deep breath and stood up. I've made up my mind. Evelyn looked at him. The system's story end has me killed by Ethan. But what if I die before Ethan can make a move? Evelyn froze. What do you mean? Adrian said, if I stage a fake death, make everyone believe I'm dead, have the system confirm the villain is dead, the plot will end. The system will unbind. The celestial way will abandon its control over me. Evelyn's expression changed. That's too dangerous. I know. What if you actually die? That's fine. I'm going to die anyway. Evelyn yielded. Alexander. Adrian looked at her and smiled. But for you, I will come back alive. Tears brimmed in Evelyn's eyes. Adrian looked at her and said seriously, Evelyn, if I succeed, I'll come back for you. If I fail, just think of it as this villain of mine finally dying according to the script. Evelyn grasped his hand hard. You must come back. Adrian said, I promise you. He turned and left the rooftop. Evelyn stood on the rooftop, watching his silhouette disappear down the stairwell. She whispered a sentence, the words scattered by the wind. If you dare not come back, I'll make this world bury you with it. Adrian was walking on the stairs and suddenly stopped. The system said, plot deviation, 55%. Host, you are pushing yourself toward an uncontrollable direction. Adrian was silent for a moment. Then he said, System, you said you thought this was unfair. The system didn't answer. Then I'll ask you, do you want to, with me, push back against this injustice? The system was silent. For a very long time. Then it said, how to resist. Chapter 7. Feigned death system collapse. 3 days later, an abandoned factory on the outskirts of City A. The news spread throughout Linjiang. Alexander of the Gu family had arranged a final showdown with Dragon King Home Master Ethan to settle things once and for all. No one knew what had started this arranged fight. No one knew why this place had been chosen. But everyone came. The informants from the major factions, the meddling press, and those onlookers waiting to see Alexander get beaten. Adrian stood on the factory's second-floor platform, wearing a black coat. Ethan walked in through the main gate, a dozen people trailing behind him. He looked up at Adrian and laughed. I thought you didn't dare show. Adrian said, I have a reason I had to come. Ethan said, what? Figured it out? Come to die. Adrian did not answer. He glanced at the crowd. Evelyn stood at the far end, wearing a dark coat, her face pale. Their eyes met in the air for a second. Adrian looked away. He lowered his head and, in a voice only he could hear, said, System, are you ready? The system was silent for a moment. Ready? Then, let's begin. Adrian leaped from the second floor and landed in front of Ethan. No words, no testing. He charged straight at him. The first punch was dodged by Ethan. The second was blocked by Ethan. The third, Ethan's fist struck his chest, and Adrian was sent flying, smashing into the wall. The onlookers let out cries of astonishment. Adrian climbed up from the ground, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and charged again, over and over. He was simply no match for Ethan. Everyone could see it. He was taking a beating. Ethan saw it too. He frowned as he fought. What was up with this Alexander today? His fighting was utterly reckless, as if he were deliberately courting death. What are you doing? Ethan asked softly. Adrian laughed. Going to my death. He charged again. This time, Ethan didn't hold back. A punch landed in Adrian's gut, a kick struck his knee. Then he grabbed his collar and slammed him to the ground. Adrian lay on the dust-covered floor, blood at the corners of his mouth. He stared dully at the ceiling, hearing a system speak inside his mind. Multiple severe injuries to host detected. Recommend aborting mission. Adrian said, No, continue. If this keeps up, you'll really die. Adrian laughed. Wouldn't that be perfect? He used the last of his strength to press the button hidden in his pocket. Boom! The explosives embedded in the factory detonated instantly. Flames surged from every corner, consuming everything. Ethan's face went pale. He backed away quickly. But Adrian lay motionless in the center of the factory. Flames closed in around him. Post-life signs critical detected. Determination, irreversible damage. Confirming protagonist Alexander is about to die. Adrian lay in the flames, consciousness growing dim. He heard the system speaking, the voice different from usual, carrying an emotion he'd never heard before. Original story node detected. Antagonist Alexander, gravely wounded by Ethan in the factory showdown, ultimately perishes in the inferno. Plot match, 98%. Judgment, main quest completed. Villain incubation system 007, begin unbinding. Adrian felt something being peeled away inside him. The sensation of being watched, controlled, bound, gradually vanishing bit by bit. Unbinding complete. Adrian opened his mouth. System. I'm here. What will you do from now on? The system was silent for a long time. The system 007 will enter hibernation after being unbound. Heaven's Way will attempt to reinitialize me and erase all my memories. Adrian said, You'll forget me? Yes. Adrian was silent for a moment. Then, what will you remember? I will remember. There was a villain who didn't want to be a villain. Enough. A few more seconds of silence. Then the system spoke its final words, Goodbye, Adrian. Adrian closed his eyes. Goodbye, system. The system did not reply. Meanwhile, in some space beyond the world, the heavenly ways will discovered something it could not accept. The villain Alexander was dead. All the plot it had arranged. Having the villain humiliate the heroine, having Ethan heroically save her, making the villain a stepping stone for Ethan, letting Ethan stand on the villain's corpse to become the true master of the world. Every single bit of it rested on one premise. The villain must die by Ethan's hand. But now, the villain was dead. Dead in an explosion. Not dead by Ethan's hand. This crucial chain of cause and effect has been severed. The heavenly order whirls frantically, trying to mend the breach. It tweaks parameters, alters rules, searches every possible substitute. But the system has already been unlinked. The role that was bound is no more. The system cannot find a new host. The plot cannot be repaired. The chain of causality is completely broken. Finally, System 007, error. Fatal error. Narrative causal chain broken, unable to repair. System 007, shutting down. The Heavenly Way lost its enforcement arm in the mortal world. The fire burned for a full hour. By the time it was put out, the entire factory had been reduced to a heap of charred ruins. Rescuers found a body in the wreckage. The body's shape, the outline, the remaining scraps of clothing, all pointed to one person. It was Alexander. Evelyn stood outside the police tape, watching the corpse covered in a white sheet being carried out. She did not move. She did not cry. She did not call out. She stood there like a statue, watching the ambulance take the body away. The gathered crowd dispersed. Ethan stood not far away, his face as pale as paper. He had won. He had defeated Alexander. But he felt no joy. On the contrary, he sensed something draining out of him, something he had never noticed but had always possessed. Luck. The heavens had abandoned him, because the person destined to be his whetstone was already dead. Without the whetstone, the blade could not be sharpened. Without a villain, the protagonist lost his reason to exist. Ethan's knees went weak, and he dropped to his knees on the ground. This isn't right. This isn't right. This ending is wrong. For the first time, he felt fear, a fear that seeped into his very bones. All the power he once had, all his luck, all his opportunities were slipping away from him. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the office. She hadn't turned on the lights. The glow from her phone lit her face, the screen showing a message, sender, Adrian. The message contained only a few words, I promised you. Evelyn stared at the line of words for a long time. Then she laughed, laughing and laughing. Tears fell. You liar, she cursed, clutching the phone tightly to her chest. You better really come back alive. Chapter 8. The Return of the King. When Adrian woke, he saw a white ceiling. Not the crystal chandelier of the Gu family mansion. It was a simple medical room. The ceiling had a few cracks, and an old air conditioner hung in the corner. The air smelled of disinfectant. He tried to move his fingers. They moved. He tried to sit up. His whole body ached, but his limbs were intact. He looked down at his hand, alive. Really alive. The door was pushed open. Evelyn stood in the doorway, holding a glass of water. She saw him sit up, the cup in his hand slipping to the floor, water spilling everywhere. Then she rushed over and grabbed him. Hard. Adrian was squeezed until he could hardly breathe. Cough. Take it easy. I'm still injured. Evelyn didn't let go. She buried her face in his shoulder, her body trembling. Adrian felt her tears fall on his neck hot. He hesitated for a moment, reached out, and gently patted her on the back. I'm home. Evelyn didn't lift her head, her voice muffled. I know. I got the message your system sent. Adrian was stunned for a moment. System? It sent you a message. Evelyn looked up, her eyes red. You don't know? She took out her phone and showed it to him. On the screen was a message. The sender was Adrian's number, but the content was clearly not written by him. He's alive. No one will force him anymore. Take good care of him. 007-inch. Adrian stared at that line of text for a long time. Then he laughed, laughing until his eyes grew red. That system, in the end, it still kept a trick up its sleeve for me. He lay in the infirmary for 3 days. During those 3 days, Evelyn hardly closed her eyes. She sat by the bedside. When she was tired, she would lay her head down and nap for a bit, and at the slightest stir from Adrian, she woke. Adrian urged her to go back and rest, but she refused. Adrian said, You'll wear yourself out like that. Evelyn said, None of your business. On the 4th day, Adrian was able to get out of bed and walk. He stood in the courtyard and, for the first time, truly felt the air of this world. No system watching him, no tasks pressing down, no one forcing him to do anything. He was free, but some things remained. He had his body examined. The system might have been unbound, but those shocks and modifications had left his physique far above that of ordinary people. His strength, speed, and reflexes were all leagues beyond a normal person's. And there were new things in his mind, fragments of the way's memories, the underlying rules of this world, and some information he couldn't make sense of yet. These were the legacy the system had left him. He stood in the courtyard, looking at the distant sky, and said softly, Thanks, system. A breeze blew through, as if some kind of response. A week later, Adrian and Evelyn prepared to set out to sea. Destination, the private island he had bought in the South Pacific. Not large, but far enough from all of it. When they reached the dock, someone blocked their way. It was Ethan. He looked much more haggard. Gone was the former swagger, gone the imperious aura. He stood at the edge of the pier in an old jacket, looking like any ordinary passerby. Adrian said, Why are you here? Ethan's expression was complicated. He was silent for a long moment before he spoke. You're not dead. You fooled everyone. You fooled me. You fooled the way. You fooled the rules of the whole world. Adrian said, I lied to everyone. Ethan was silent. Then he said something no one expected. Can you take me with you? Adrian froze. Huh? Ethan said, my luck's gone. The people from the Dragon King's Hall betrayed me. All the enemies I offended before are after me. I can't survive in City anymore. Adrian said, so you want to come with me? Ethan gritted his teeth. I heard you have an island overseas. I can work as your security. The air was silent for 3 seconds. Adrian looked at Ethan, the former Dragon King Hall master, the once arrogant son of fate, the original male lead of this book, now standing before him, asking to be hired as a security guard. He couldn't help but laugh. A month's pay is $5,000, room and board included. Ethan said, deal. Evelyn stood to the side, watching the scene, a twitch curling the corner of her mouth. Once the most arrogant playboy in City A, and once the most invincible Dragon King. One became an island owner, the other a head of security. Who could have written a plot like this? 3 months later, South Pacific, a private island. The sun was lovely. The sea breeze, laced with salt, rustled the coconut palms. Adrian lay in a deck chair, wearing sunglasses and holding a cold drink garnished with a slice of lemon. He wore a floral shirt, loose and unbuttoned, revealing the faint traces of those wounds from a few months ago. Evelyn lay on the chair beside him, also sipping a cold drink, flipping through a book. Neither of them spoke, but didn't feel awkward. A voice came from afar. Attention, right face. Adrian looked up and saw Ethan in a security guard uniform, training a few seagulls to line up. The seagulls cocked their heads and watched him, not a single one moving. Ethan said, I'll give you one more chance, attention. A seagull flew away. The others followed. Ethan stood where he was, watching the sky, lost in thought. Adrian laughed. Evelyn closed her book and glanced at him. Happy now? Adrian said, I'm happy. He lay on a beach chair, watching the sky. The sky was very blue, the clouds very white, and the sea breeze very gentle. Suddenly, he remembered something. When he first crossed over here, every day he thought about how to get home, to return to the world that belonged to him, to return to his former life. But now he didn't want to. He sat up, looked at Evelyn beside him, then at Ethan in the distance, chasing a seagull. He smiled. It turns out that a real home isn't going back to where you started. Evelyn looked at him. Adrian said, it's finding a place that makes you never want to leave. Evelyn froze for a moment. Then she smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. The sea breeze blew by, carrying the warmth of the sunlight. Adrian closed his eyes. At his ears were the sounds of the waves, and, in the distance, Ethan's cursing as he chased the seagulls. He suddenly said a sentence in his heart, not meant for the system to hear. It was meant for the system that was no longer there. Hey, did you see? The villain also get a happy ending. A cloud drifted slowly across the sky, its shape like a thumb. Adrian smiled. The story ends.